الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. Welcome to our new series, The Empty Space. Last year I did a series called Towards a Modern Awakening, and I talked about a number of different topics that I thought were important for us to revise as Muslims for the benefit of our societies and for our ummah. And amongst the topics that I talked about was the topic of tazkiyah. And I decided to make this series a spin-off off that topic and talk a little bit more about details regarding what tazkiyah means and why it's important and what we can really do to practice it properly and how that can change our lives. So today, inshallah, is the first episode, and it's going to be an introductory episode. It's going to be an introduction to what, inshallah, to expect in the next 6 episodes, inshallah. Every day after Asr at 5:30, we will run this halaqah. I had a unique experience growing up, learning Islam. I spent half of my Islamic upbringing in Saudi Arabia during the 90s, and then I spent the rest of it in Syria in the early 2000s. And at the time, both countries were practicing and basically advertising, encouraging a version of Islamic thought that was very different from the other. They were almost like two polars of Islamic thought in the world, very different from one another. And being able to actually experience these two different approaches to Islam and to Islamic thought was very enriching and very helpful, and it granted me a lot of insights that I feel helped me understand more of how a lot of what has occurred today developed over the centuries. And when you study what I studied in Damascus during the early 2000s, a lot of the shuyukh that I learned from and taught me were ulama tazkiyah and suluk. There were scholars of tazkiyah, of purification and of behaviors. And the word that is commonly used to describe this is called tasawwuf, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And what you find when you deal with them or when you learn from them is they have a very profound understanding of the intricacies of the human experience on the inside. They have a very, very profound understanding of how the spirit and the soul and the body all interact, and why it is we feel the way we feel, why it is we think the way we think, and why it is we behave the way we behave. And they have ways of adjusting these thoughts and adjusting these feelings and adjusting these behaviors and teaching you how to deal with them in a mature manner and how to actually get rid of the feelings and thoughts and behaviors that you don't like and replace them with something that you do. And I learned a lot about myself. And I felt like as I went through Islamic education, academically, non-academically, and then I turned into teaching and dealing with youth, that element of Islamic upbringing, that element of tarbiyah didn't exist, or it had died off through maybe the last 80 or 90 years. And the reason that it died off is that tasawwuf, that word, which is basically what tazkiyah is, that word became associated with a lot of practices that were frowned upon, practices that truly did have a lot of bid'ah in them, practices that did have a lot of controversial aspects of behavior, and people who followed tasawwuf started doing and saying things that did not represent what the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ actually explained, and they did exist. Now the problem was that those who saw these mistakes, instead of trying to correct the mistakes themselves, they removed the discipline altogether. And that movement of removing the whole discipline has had true and real consequences on the Muslim ummah and on the upbringing of the Muslim individual in the Muslim world and outside the Muslim world. Just because there are people who made real mistakes, sometimes the mistakes were quite heavy and quite significant, and they had consequences on people's thought process and people's behaviors, doesn't mean that you got rid of the whole discipline. I mean, there's a lot of people who made up hadith upon the Prophet ﷺ. You don't get rid of the whole discipline of hadith, you just purify it. You get rid of all the stuff that shouldn't be there, and you leave the stuff that are important. The same thing goes for the science or the knowledge or the knowledge discipline of tasawwuf. There are aspects of the spirituality that exists in it that we 100% need, that actually we can't survive as an ummah without. So removing them completely, or removing the discipline and starting from scratch today, saying, okay, we're going to start all over again in understanding spirituality, with completely ignoring 1,400 years of work that's been put into that discipline, is not going to work. And that's what a lot of people have done, and it hasn't paid off, and it will not pay off. And we need to take from this discipline of knowledge that which is beneficial for us, and we can leave that which is not, which needs to be revised and looked at again. And I think that's the proper approach to this topic, the concept of tazkiyah and the concept of tasawwuf. Now you may ask the question, why are we talking about this? I mean, there's a lot more. There are many more problems in the world that are pressing. I don't think that we are capable as Muslims or as human beings to change the world around us if we are not capable of changing the world inside of us. I think when we waste a lot of time looking outside, our eyesight is outwards, looking for solutions for our problems, we are actually missing the main point, that the solutions and problems actually lie within. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wasn't cruel to put our problems and solutions far away from us, where we have to go seeking for days or weeks or months or years trying to find something to help us, when really everything we've ever needed, everything that we actually require to change the world, it lies within. It always baffled me how we would study in school for 12, 13 years, and we would know the names of mountains and parts of the earth that we would never visit. We would know names of war commanders that died thousands of years ago. We would know about civilizations and the names of the cities that they had. We would have all this information about things that, for the most part, wouldn't really affect us in our lives. We would forget maybe the next day or the next year, and we'd have very little recollection of what that was. Learning about everything, but we learned very little about what lies inside. We know very little about ourselves, about what it means to be a human being. Why is it that we feel the way we feel? Why is it that we think the way we think? Why is it that we behave the way we behave? And it's very peculiar to me. We send our children to get educated, but they don't learn about the thing they're going to be dealing with for the rest of their lives. What's the point of going to school for 25 years, but never really learning the most important piece of information that there is? How to actually live, who you are, why you are. And that's unfortunately, regardless of whether you're religious or not religious, not understanding yourself seems to be a very bad idea. Knowing everything else but the thing that is stuck with you every moment of your life seems to be quite a big waste of time. In this series, inshallah, I'm going to be talking a little bit about these issues. I'm going to take the knowledge that the scholars of Islamic law, of tazkiyah and tasawwuf have put forward, and I'm going to take information that we have today from psychology and psychiatry and sociology to better understand ourselves, to better understand why it is we are the way we are, and whether the way we are is something that is constant, or is it something that has the potential to actually change. Why now? Why am I talking about this now? Because throughout the pandemic, I noticed a very significant increase in the levels of anxiety, depression, and mental health issues within our societies, especially for our youth. I don't claim that what I'm going to be doing here is going to cure mental illnesses. Ma'adallah, that is 100% not what I'm doing. But we do know that the less a person understands themselves and the less they're capable of dealing with life as it happens, the more anxiety and depression they have, and that predisposes them for more mental illnesses that will make it more difficult for them to function in life. So this is, inshallah, understanding this will be helpful. Will be helpful for us to live a life of mental health, to actually feel healthy mentally. This will help. This is not a cure. Those who have mental health issues need to see specialists and need to go to their psychologists and to their psychiatrists and take medications and do whatever therapies and go to the therapies that they should be going to. This is only going to be one of the building bricks. It's just going to, it's there to help. And for those who don't have mental health issues but would like to care for their mental wellness and well-being, then this is definitely something that they should start learning about and start spending some time trying to understand. And that's why I think it's important for us to attend to doing that now. The Prophet ﷺ made it very clear to us that in order for our deeds and actions to be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are conditions. There are conditions that will allow a deed to be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's not enough to just do the mechanics right. There has to be an inner part to that deed that is also correct. And if that inner part, if the niyyah isn't proper, if the motive isn't proper, if the thought process during it wasn't proper, then the action will not be accepted. And if the action is not accepted, then you won't really benefit from it in dunya or in akhirah. And that kind of ends this stream very abruptly in a way that makes us wonder, what's the point of doing something? What's the point of praying if your prayer is not accepted? What's the point of fasting if fasting is not accepted? What is the point of doing really anything for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if it's not going to be accepted? And taking care of al-batin, of the inner part of the deed, rather than just the zahir, the apparent part of the deed, both being quite important. Mind you, I'm not saying the apparent part is not important. All I'm saying is that in this series I'm going to focus on the inner part. You want to know how to pray, the movements, then you should go and learn that properly. That is your obligation to do so. I'm not going to be talking about that during this series. I'm going to be talking about the inner part. How is it that we come to a point where you actually find joy in it, where you actually find yourself focused, where you actually benefit from the action that you're doing? He says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنْظُرُ إِلَى صُوَرِكُمْ وَأَجْسَادِكُمْ وَلَكِنْ يَنْظُرُ إِلَى قُلُوبِكُمْ وَأَعْمَالِكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't look at your appearance, doesn't look at your picture or your body. What He looks at is at your hearts and the quality of your deeds. If you go and you look into the Quran for the concept of tazkiyah, so you understand why I think this is an important issue that we should be talking about, and the scholars of Islam historically have taken great interest in it, is when you look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about sending messengers. He talks about sending messengers in a couple of places in the Quran. In Surah Al-Imran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, in Surah Al-Jumu'ah. And every time he talks about sending messengers, meaning the general concept of sending prophets to humanity, he uses the same four reasons of why he sent these messengers. هُوَ الَّذِي بَعَثَ فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ. And then he's the one who sent amongst the illiterate a prophet from amongst them to do four things. يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ, to tell them the signs of God. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, and to purify them. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ, to teach them the guidance of the book, meaning what to do, وَالْحِكْمَةَ, and the wisdom of when and how to do it. When Ibrahim alayhi salam asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send amongst the people of Mecca as he was building the Kaaba with his son Ismail, he said, وَرَبَّنَا وَبَعَثْ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِكَ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. Will Allah send amongst them a prophet from them that will tell them your signs, teach them the book, teach them wisdom, and purify them, وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. But then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answered him, لَقَدْ مَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذْ بَعَثَ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا مِّنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ. He answered him saying, yes, indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted the believers a bounty when He sent amongst them a prophet from within them that was going to tell them His signs and purify them. And the word yuzakkihim was moved. Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he knew the four reasons that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would send prophets for, but he didn't have the sequence straight. So he put yuzakkihim at the end. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he answered him, he put it back. It's the second thing. The first thing that prophets come and do is they tell us who God is, who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, so that we know who it is that we are obeying, who it is that we are worshipping, who is the one that put us here, what attributes that one has, so that we know what we're doing. Because if the one that put you here is not doesn't care for you or is extremely flawed, then the way you're going to deal with that deity is going to be different. But the prophet's job is to explain to us Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so we actually understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so we appreciate who He is, and we are ready to actually listen to what He has to say. So that's the first thing that's going to happen. The second one, yuzakkihim, and to purify them. Teach them how to purify themselves. Isn't that why Adam alayhi salam left paradise? Adam alayhi salam was new. It wasn't his fault. This was all, it's all symbolic. The Quran is trying to show us the problem. Adam alayhi salam had everything available to him, but he didn't have enough self-control not to do something he was told not to do. He didn't have that self-control. He had not obtained that yet. He was still fresh, new human being, still enjoying all the perks of being a human being, all the thought process and the feelings and the ability to process information and the ability to draw parallels and to think and to wonder and to ask questions. So it was something very new, but he didn't have self-control, wasn't able to control himself. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, you need to go to earth and live. You need to go live in nature. You have to go figure yourself out. You have to go learn to get self-control. You need to learn to appreciate what you have, not take it for granted, not to feel entitled. There are certain lessons you have to go learn. All of these lessons, by the way, that Adam was supposed to go learn are lessons of the heart, are lessons of the soul and the spirit and the inner self, rather than the mechanics of what's going to happen on the outside. Actually, everything you do mechanically is supposed to serve you internally. Just to make this even more important, so that you really understand what it is. Everything that you're doing is supposed to be benefiting you internally, so that your heart, the status of your heart and your spirit and your soul start to elevate closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Without that happening, it's completely useless. Ilm without huda is useless. If you have knowledge but you don't have huda, it doesn't help you. Without guidance, it doesn't help at all. Scholars who don't take what they learn and apply it to themselves, so that they become closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not literal, it's figurative, obviously. And that figurative aspect of it is something that happens on the inside, then that knowledge is completely useless. So really everything that we're doing, its goal is to draw us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's an issue of internal functionality. And that's why tazkiyah is extremely important. But what's the point? Isn't that what Ramadan is? Ramadan comes and takes away all the materialistic aspects of your existence. No food and drink or sexual drive. Move that all away. None of that is accessible to you anymore. So what's left? You are forced to focus on your inner self. That's the goal of Ramadan. And it's there every single year. We don't skip a year. It's 8% of our lives. To focus on that aspect. He says subhanahu wa ta'ala in a surah where he makes 11 oaths in a row. وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا جَلَّاهَا وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَاهَا وَالسَّمَاءِ وَمَا بَنَاهَا وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا طَحَاهَا وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا وَالسَّمَاءِ وَمَا بَنَاهَا. Each one is an oath, so it's 11 altogether. فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. So he took an oath by the sun, by the shams, and by the duha. I mean, the moment where the sun is in the middle of the sky and it's shining as bright as it ever will. And he took an oath by the moon, took an oath by the day, took an oath by the night, took an oath by the sky, he took an oath by the matter that went into making the sky what it is, making the cosmos and everything in it. He took an oath by the earth, he took an oath by everything that went into the earth, into making it the way it is. He took an oath by nafs, by the soul. He took an oath, the 11th oath, وَمَا سَوَّاهَا, and everything that went into making the nafs what it is. 11 oaths in a row. Nowhere else in the Quran. Never. The highest is maybe 5. 11 in a row, where he takes an oath subhanahu wa ta'ala by everything that we witness around us that we are aware of. The cosmos and everything. In it, the earth, everything. On it, and so everything. To say, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. Those who purify themselves will find success. And those who fail to purify themselves, those who don't do it, will be extremely disappointed Yawm al-Qiyamah. See, if only that first ayah was there, then maybe this series wouldn't be as necessary. But the second ayah is there. I mean, if you do, the first ayah is, if you purify, you'll be extremely successful. And if that was the end of it, well, if I don't purify, it doesn't say necessarily that I won't. He's just saying that if I do, I will. But the second ayah makes it very clear. وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. If you don't purify yourself, then you will be disappointed Yawm al-Qiyamah. And khaba is disappointment. It's very accurate wording. Why? Why is it disappointment? Because Yawm al-Qiyamah, when you come expecting your deeds to be accepted, you're going to be disappointed. Too many problems there. Too much hasad, too much riya, too much vanity, too much arrogance, too much oblivions, too much laziness, too much lust, too many problems surrounded these deeds. Too much self-interest in these deeds. There's lack of sincerity, and then you end up getting a fraction of what you were hoping to be rewarded for, and it's a disappointment because you hadn't made those calculations. And that's the very important part. He says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى وَذَكَرَ اسْمَ رَبِّهِ فَصَلَّى بَلْ تُؤْثِرُونَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى إِنَّ هَذَا لَفِي الصُّحُفِ الْأُولَى صُحُفِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَمُوسَى. The famous surah of Al-A'la that is recited almost every Jum'ah during prayer. He says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, indeed the ones who purify will find extreme success. Those who remember their Allah subhanahu, their Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala and establish their prayer. But the problem is that you love this life too much. Even though al-akhirah is going to last longer and it's better. It's better and lasts longer, but we're attached to this life too much. Indeed, this piece of wisdom existed in the early suhuf, in the early books. The books of Ibrahim and Musa. This goes as far as prophecy goes. Because every prophet was sent to do the exact same thing, to teach the exact same concepts. That we need to perform tazkiyah in order for us to actually be able to function. I always like to imagine what's happening inside similar to what's happening outside. When you look at the universe, it's huge, the cosmos, millions of galaxies. And there are these black holes in the galaxy that so dense they will basically gravitate, everything will gravitate to them, and they just swallow everything. They can swallow complete solar systems. Inside our hearts, inside of us, there are black holes as well. That feeling of emptiness, that feeling of loneliness, that feeling of aimlessness that occurs and overcomes us at certain points in our lives when we're tired or we're stressed or we're finding difficulty or we don't have companionship. And for those moments where you just feel so empty on the inside, that empty space is always going to be there. It's like a black hole. Nothing you put in it is going to fill it up. You can throw everything you have on it. You can throw vacations, you can throw money, you can throw cars and games and possessions, you can throw relationships, you can throw drinking and drugs, you can throw anything you want, and it'll just get bigger and bigger and bigger. It'll just swallow more and more and more, and that emptiness inside is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. The only thing that will close it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the only thing that will close that black hole inside of us, is Allah. Is knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That will close it. But anything else, and the human being has been in pursuit of trying to close that gap, trying to silence that scary sound of whistling emptiness that he finds inside of him since he existed. And that's why we have, for example, we've come to the point today where we're never alone. Because you always have your phone. And you're always talking to someone. And you're always communicating with some living thing. At no point are we fully alone. Even people you can't go to the bathroom alone anymore. We're so scared of being alone, of being disconnected. You want to get your kids to come and sit in the living room? Just take out the Wi-Fi. And you'll discover people living in your house that you didn't even know were living there. It's the truth of how we are now. We're so scared of being alone that we've developed systems that will never allow us to be alone. But nothing changes. That emptiness is still sitting there. It always has and always will. It's not going to go away. That feeling is never going to go away. You can ignore it as much as you like. Some people ignore it till the day they die. Doesn't mean it goes away. It's still there. And the effect of it on you is going to be there. And the consequence of it, if you leaving it, is going to be there Yawm al-Qiyamah as well. Until you deal with it. Until you look at it. Stare at it and actually find a way to. Because it doesn't have to be like that. That's what we know from studying the Prophet ﷺ's life. He says alayhi salatu wasalam, ذَاقَ طَعْمَ الْإِيمَانِ مَنْ رَضِيَ بِاللَّهِ رَبًّا وَبِالْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا وَبِمُحَمَّدٍ نَبِيًّا وَرَسُولًا صلى الله عليه وسلم. ذَاقَ طَعْمَ الْإِيمَانِ. You'll find the sweet nectar of belief if you're truly content with Allah as your Lord and Islam as your faith in the Prophet ﷺ as your guide. He uses these wordings in his hadith that refer to the fact that وَجُعِلَتْ قُرَّةُ عَيْنِي فِي الصَّلَاةِ. And I find the cool of my eye within prayer. قُرَّةُ عَيْنِي, cool of my eye, that's the literal translation. What he means is that I find full calmness. I find true happiness when I'm in prayer. And when we listen to that, it sounds nice, but how many people have actually experienced that? How many of us have actually found what that how many of us actually know what that means? And if not, then when? And is there a plan to get there? Are there steps being taken? Or are you waiting for it to happen? Or does it not matter to you whether it happens or not? What do we benefit? How does this help us? How does learning these things actually help us? All right. Number one, gives you a proper understanding of who you are. If we can understand ourselves properly, understand why it is that when someone said that, I felt that way. Why it is that when this happened, this was my response. These were my thoughts. Why it is that I acted the way I acted. This is an asset that's extremely valuable. If you possess this ability to properly understand yourself, then you are capable of taking steps to be better. Instead of continuously living a life where we're reacting to everything around us in a very primitive manner, we start understanding, okay, yeah, this is natural to think like this, but that shouldn't be how it is forever. This should change. I should be able to change this. I don't want to think like that anymore. I don't want to feel like that anymore. The second thing, to build on that first benefit, is control. You become in control. Instead of you living based on the feelings that are basically generated from what's happening around you, instead of behaving in ways that you don't necessarily would have wanted to behave if you look back at it later, you become in control. You're the one who dictates what's going to happen, what's not going to happen. You dictate whether you're going to act like that or not, whether you're going to feel like that or not, whether you're going to respond like that or not, whether you're going to say these things or not. You even become in control of your own emotions and feelings and direct them. This control is extremely. How do we change the world if we can't change what's inside? How do we control anything? As human beings, again, to kind of draw a parallel so that this is clear and you can understand it. We love to be in control. We love to control everything around us as much as we can. The more control, the better. That hunger for control is one of the ugliest things that exist within human nature, but it's real. It's real. It drives so many changes in the world on a global level. That hunger for control. That people want to control other people's behaviors, control their destinies, control what they can and cannot say, can and cannot do. Even in households, you love to control. If you're a parent, you want to control everyone there. That you want them to do what you want, say what you want, behave the way you want. This urge to control everybody. And really, the only thing you're supposed to control is yourself. The only thing you are supposed to control is that urge to want to control. That's what you should have controlled. Say, no, we're not doing that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala controls. He is the king subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he gave people full freedom to say and do what they want. So maybe we need to reconsider that. Our job is not to control. Our job is to serve, but our job is not to control others. Our job is to control ourselves. Be content with being able to control your own emotions, your own feelings, your own thoughts. And you'll see the difference. You'll see, well, you'll be a much happier human being. Which takes me to the third benefit. الطمأنينة. You'll come to a point of calmness. You will calm down. And you'll see life for the reality of what it is, and you'll start to be able to value in life what is truly valuable, and discard the things that are not, because you're no longer ruled or run or controlled by other things. Isn't that what Ramadan does? It tells you you're not a slave to food. Food does not control you. Food does not own you. You're hungry? Yeah, well, tough it up. Don't eat for 17, 18 hours. Prove that you're not owned by your urge to eat. You don't eat. You don't live so you can eat. You eat so you can live. This calmness comes from understanding these things, being in control. And then, because once you're in control, you have the proper perspective. It's like your head is focused downwards. And then when you start controlling yourself, you're able to lift your head. And now you can see the landscape. Now you can see the bigger picture. So you calm down. And you find that life is different than the way the way most people understand it or see it or feel it or experience it. Number 4, compassion. This will make you more compassionate. Because once you understand why it is you feel the way you feel, you start understanding why it is others feel the way they feel and why others behave the way they behave. So you become more compassionate. You see someone behaving this way, you see someone who's extremely upset and yelling, and instead of feeling offended, you understand this is a person who's probably going through a lot, and this is their response. This is their psychological response to all the stress that they're under. You stop hating, you stop judging, and you start feeling compassionate because you understand how this works. Because you have, the nufus are pretty much the same, almost identical. We all have almost the same set of internal elements. We have the same organs on the inside. It's only makes sense for us to have the same internal spiritual elements as well. Very, very little differences exist on the inside. And I'll talk about that inshallah more as we go along. Another benefit from doing this is sabr. What I mean by sabr is perseverance regarding life. Once you become in control, once you have that calmness of understanding the world properly, once you understand yourself, you're able to deal with life in a much better way. The way that you react to failure, the way that you react to loss, the way that you react to disappointment, the way that you react to stress and anxiety changes, because you understand things on a much deeper scale now. It allows you to become a much more perseverant individual, understanding and connecting with who you are on the inside. That empty space that exists, children know it's there from the moment they are capable of communication. That's why they never want to be alone. They always want to be with someone. Send your kids to play in their room by themselves. They're not happy. They want to play with you watching. It's that emptiness that starts developing the moment you start thinking and comprehending and understanding. And it never truly goes away unless we're able to take the time and actually address it. It takes bravery and it takes strength. And it takes a determination that unfortunately not everybody necessarily has. But if we're able to shed light on these topics and on these issues and explain what's actually going on inside, what do we have on the inside? What does the Quran say about these things? What nomenclature does the Quran use in describing the inner workings of the human being? If we're able to come up with a few strategies that the Quran itself explains, and the Prophet ﷺ actually took time to practice and teach the Sahaba, then we can start tackling these problems one after the other. And we can start taking on the diseases of the heart, as they're called, the Amrad al-Qulub, taking on the these internal struggles that exist inside the heart and mind of every human being, and breaking them down to why they're there. What caused them to be there? What brought them there? What put them there? And then, are they something that can change? Do we need to completely get rid of them? Do we need to adjust them? Do we need to learn to deal with them in a more mature way or not? And that is something I believe that what we're going to be talking about, inshallah, is something that should exist in curriculums for children. But how do you teach a child something that you have not mastered yourself? They say, فَاقِدُ الشَّيْءِ لَا يُعْطِيهِ. Someone who does not possess something cannot give it. I don't claim that what I'll be saying here today is the full and ultimate and only truth. I don't claim to have a full grasp on my own self. But I believe that there's enough information and knowledge that exists, that are available, that if I put them together for you, hopefully I can at least draw a basic roadmap to where we should be going. And maybe make you feel how important this aspect, this spirituality aspect, is for us as Muslims. And that without it, we really can't function. Ramadan reminds us of something in an indirect way that I've always thought was extremely interesting. It reminds us that your body really does need food and water. Not just that you don't need to eat all day long and you're not here only to eat. That's good. But it also kind of reminds in an indirect way that you do need a certain amount of nourishment to survive. Without that nourishment, the body cannot survive. What about the spirit then? What about the soul? Do they not need nourishment as well? What is their nourishment? And if you deprive them from their nourishment, how long is it before they die, figuratively speaking? I mean, death is the removal of the soul, spirit from the body, but what if it dies earlier than that? What if it stops functioning? It's not there anymore. Many people complain of losing their emotions and losing their feelings towards everything and anything. They feel that nothing is satisfying, nothing puts them in a good mood. They're not happy about anything, they're not excited about anything, they're not passionate about anything. The reason is simple. Ramadan teaches us that. I mean, imagine your body has to be nourished every day. Why do you think we pray 5 times a day? You eat 3 times a day, but you pray 5. Because apparently, what's on the inside is actually in need of more frequent nourishment than this, clay, soil-based box that we exist in. And I think that's something that we should take any time to contemplate upon. That was the introduction to this series, inshallah. Tomorrow, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, we'll start by talking about definitions. I'll start defining for you, inshallah, a lot of the concepts that exist in the Quran about the nafs. And inshallah, we will use whatever knowledge or information we're capable of utilizing from psychology and psychiatry and sociology. Because today there's a lot of information that we can benefit from out there, and we should be putting it all together, and we should be trying to build a better understanding of who we are, what we are, and where we are going. So I'll see you inshallah tomorrow at 5:30. Please feel free to put any questions you like on the video itself. If you watch it later, just put the questions. We're going to have a Q&A session, inshallah, at the end when I'm done. And if you put the question now, if it's fresh and you have the question, put it. I'll try and address it throughout the talks if I can. If not, we'll recite it, read the question during the Q&A session, and I'll address it at that time as well. So feel free to do that and share this with whoever you think would be interested in the topic itself and what it may entail upon them. بارك الله فيكم جزاكم الله خير سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى اله وصحبه اجمعين السلام عليكم ورحمه الله تعالى وبركاته